Hello, welcome to this episode of the About Time series. It's me, Chris Nichols. I'm delighted to be in series two. And as you know, series two, but the same intention, having conversations with people I've known um, over the years who've inspired me and influenced me in various ways. And I'm delighted that today is no exception. I've got my old friend, Fiona Tilley. It's great to see you. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you very much, and it's wonderful to have this opportunity and this invitation. I'm really flattered. Thank you.
So, what might be great is if you could just say a few words as for people who don't know you at all.
Mm.
Um, who are you and what do you do?
Um, well, you've introduced me. My name's Tilly, and this question, well, who am I, is probably a little bit easier. So, I'm a person who was born and raised in the north of England, so that's very much shaped me and my sense of humour and my love of nature, because I was fortunate to live on the edge of the Peak District and travelled a lot to the Lake District. So that's really shaped my soul and what makes my heart sing. What I do is a question I travel with all the time, and in the doing, I know what I do. In the abstractness, it kind of evaporates and it becomes very, very difficult to put into words. The place I feel most amongst my tribe and my people is in places that are often labelled educational. And that's because I think what the little carrot in front of me that I'm following around, sort of figuratively, is my curiosity. And educational spaces really are about allowing people to delve into their curiosity and to have a really amazing question that lets them go on a journey, whether it's an inner journey or even an outer journey or both. And those are the spaces that bring me alive. So I would say what I do is find myself in those spaces, and typically with groups of people. So it's a co-created inquiry journey. And they're the most exciting because they're the most mysterious and often bumpy. And I like that.
Yeah. So that's like a brilliant answer where you say you don't know the answer and then you answer it brilliantly. So, um, so tell me a bit more because we met like at Schumacher College, I remember, and I can't
Mm,
remember when, but it's quite a long time ago. Can you remember which
yeah.
year it was?
It was probably early 2009 because the very first time I came to Schumacher College was in autumn 2008. And
Mm.
I did an experimental course on sustainable leadership with Richard Olivier and
Ah,
mythodrama,
yes.
and
Yeah.
just had my whole world met, but also pivoted. And I thought, yes, I need to come back to this place. And I discovered that there was this sort of there was a second year of a course, a longer inquiry, great, around education for sustainability, and you were part of it. Well, you're a big part
Mm.
of it. You and Chris Seeley and Toni Spencer were kind of the backbone of it, and that's where we first met, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, when we met, I think like the first thing I remember about you was you had recently stopped being a business school academic. Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah.
So I actually had to resign twice. It's a bit like a movie where the baddie has to die twice at the end. So I had resigned at some point in 2008, knowing that somehow life needed to take me somewhere else. And I think the university and family sort of persuaded me maybe that wasn't the right move right then. And so I kind of
Yeah.
withdrew it. And then I began that course, and it gave me the courage and the support to be able to do it. Because I think
Mm.
making a decision which is counterintuitive to your culture, to the story you live in, is really difficult to do alone.
Mm.
It's not impossible, but it's difficult. And it's difficult enough anyway. So to have the fortune to be in that environment and have your support and that space to to hold me through what is essentially quite a terrifying thing to do. You know, walk away from job security, status, identity, what is really getting towards the top of the mountain of a career doesn't make a lot of sense rationally, but it wasn't really a decision coming from a rational space. So yes, you met me at a point where I was making a huge life decision, and I was very lucky.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I remember it well because you um, were sometimes part in the program and part out because you simply needed to be out. I mean, either working in the Schumacher kitchen, as I remember, or or just outside. And fortunately, it was the kind of course that allowed for any of that. Yeah.
Well, it, even when I reflect back on it now, you know, it moves me actually realizing how experienced and wise the three of you were to recognize that I was not absencing myself from the course. I was doing what I needed to do to learn and unlearn in order to come back and give into the course, as it were, because I was very much participating.
Yeah.
But I was a brain on a stick. I didn't need more intellectual head knowledge. That muscle was doing fine. It was the rest of me that was crying out for the learning. And so being on the land here in Dartington and being in the community, this learning community, this living learning community that was the college that the course sat within, was in lots of ways where I needed to be. But without the permission of the course, it would have been hard to facilitate that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Mm. And and so since 2009, so we're talking 15, 16
Yeah.
years, you have done so much more, both at Schumacher and beyond. I mean, I know it's hard to encapsulate it, but can you give us some snapshots? What's it been like? Like what sort of things have you been doing?
Um, well, mostly, like I said, working with groups, and those groups tend to be those gathering people who are going through a significant change, transition, be it personal or be it in response to what seemingly is happening in the world around them, and seeking to lean into that space. I would say that more latterly, say for the last, since maybe 2015, 16, so the last sort of 2/3 of that, the last decade, it's pivoted a lot around what I'm going to use clunky language here. So, because English can be clunky, so I'm well aware of the awkwardness, but indigenous spaces. So, spaces where moderns like me, who've been educated and cultured in a Western a story paradigm, are meeting first forest people or river people or mountain people, people who don't carry the story of separation. And at that bridging point, some absolutely fascinating things happen because it's not a linear exchange. In those learning spaces, there is reciprocity, there is something going back and forth and something new emerging. And it may be doing that for the next 100 or so years. I mean, you know, this is an early inquiry, as it were. Something novel is happening in those spaces. So I like to find myself, if you know, the powers that be deem it so. That's the place where I like to find myself most. And then in those spaces, we are starting to find that new language, that new story, and just start to listen to the tendrils of that. So that's very abstract. In specific terms, it's more harder to name because they are very precious spaces. And I would say they're not secretive spaces, but they're spaces not to speak too much about in detail in order to to attend to them and take care of them, and let them, because if they are seeds being planted into fertile, rich soil, as it were, what you don't want to do is go around prodding at it, moving the soil away, having a look, is the seed still there? Oh, put the soil back on top. You just trust that it's doing what it needs to do.
But Tilly, I mean, how do these groups come about? I mean, are they, because when my groups, it's quite often I get a group together because I get invited by a university or an organisation saying, "Oh, come and work with this group." That's not. It doesn't sound like that's how these groups are coming about. I mean, what happens?
So what I've noticed more recently, well, there's a couple of ways. One is that there is some kind of event that's happened or about to happen in the bigger story of the world, like, for example, a COP summit, or there's been a natural disaster or something like that, and that then sets out a spark and a call starts to go around. And if you hear that call, if you happen to hear that call and you are available, you show up. So that's one way that work can come about. The other way that I'm beginning to see that maybe is more familiar to the world that you move in, which is a more, like you said, the corporate world or the institutional world, like education or NHS or something like that, is that people are beginning to form networks or alliances, which is a gentler, less formal way of creating gatherings and building relationship and building that sense of reciprocity without it being too formalized and rule laden, and where money and pockets of power can become a distraction. So this notion of affectionate alliance, people coming together from a place of affection, and that affection can be expressed towards each other and what each other's work and passions are about. And it can also be the affection that we hold towards life and towards ecosystems in the world and towards what's happening. But that it's explicit that what's being tended to is not something that's about ego. It's not about taking a legacy for some kind of change or influence. It's not about the accruing of resources into a certain place. Although those things might happen, that's not the intention. And so those alliances, they often need either local or experienced guides, facilitators, just to sit at a certain point in the circle and offer in practices and processes so that they can do. It's a bit like a musician. Someone's got to play the music if everyone wants to dance. And it's like, so that's, so you find yourself because people know and hear of you. So it's very word of mouth and organic. And I can't say that it's I go onto LinkedIn and find a job opportunity and apply. It's not like that.
So the practices you use when you're sitting in the circle, are they practices that you developed yourself, or you just learned from over the years just by being in enough circles? Because I know you've facilitated at Schumacher for years and years and years, all kinds of groups. I mean, you probably had more facilitation experience than most people in the country. I mean, kind of what's gone into the mix to make your facilitation what it is?
Well, that's very kind of you to say, firstly. When I speak to, they had a system at Schumacher College where new people coming in to facilitate would shadow someone so they kind of got a sense. And I always used to say to them, come in and shadow and see kind of like how a day flows. But do know that your way to facilitate your expression will be different to mine because because you are different, and that's how it should be. So there isn't a cookie cutter way, I don't believe, to truly facilitate, because it's ultimately a listening process, and it's a loving process, but it's a listening process. And how you listen and what you hear are going to be unique to each person, and there is no objective truth. So how each person interprets it's theirs. The practices for me in the early years, I've got to say a deep gratitude to elders like Joanna Macy or John Seed, or I'm trying to think, Otto Sharma. There's many who have come before, John Young, who kind of wrote down essentially some of their practices and their work through the 70s, 80s, and beyond. So kind of a recent interpretation of perennial wisdom of how relationship is built, how we build a non-hierarchical consensus form of togetherness that brings in the more than human as well as the human, and all kinds of things. And yet they are bringing in a language and an interpretation that make it accessible in the places that we go into. And yes, we adapt them to a moment. So we might tweak it. It's a bit like driving a car. Not every car drives the same, but the fundamentals are kind of basically there. You've got steering wheel in front of you, and you've got to well, maybe not in the future with technology. So now I feel much of it is reflexive. It's sort of seeped down into the unconscious, but it had to be placed there at some point by observation, watching people. I love watching and being part of a process with a facilitator who is in their prime, and just admiring that skill. And I always learn something. So I'm always learning, and part of my facilitation practice is to stretch myself every year with something new.
Yeah.
So
we could definitely come back to that. Right. Stretch yourself with something new.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say, one of the things I love in these podcasts is noticing connections between different episodes. And just as you were introducing that little piece, you said it's about listening, and you said, and it's about love.
Yeah.
And those two words have run right through this series in many ways. I'm thinking Helena Clayton was on here a while ago. I don't know if you know her work, but she runs something called the Love Lab, Love in Organizations. And you can't do this work without love. And I think Joanna Macy would probably say the same. And we've had Michael Chaskalson, who 40 or 50 years ordained Buddhist, who does this work, and Helen Shiroda. And I think they would all agree, this listening, compassion, love, and not just listening to the human, the listening to the more than human, which for many people, many organizations sounds a little bit edgy. And at the same time, when I work in organizations, actually, most organizations are actually trying to do that in some way. They just don't have the language to name that. You might get labeled global tipping points. But like last week, I was at Exeter University at the Global Tipping Points conference, and they were like little substreams desperately trying to hear the voice or listen to the voice of the more than human. But when it gets turned into the scientific papers, it's hard to hear the voice.
Yeah, it's hard to hear the voice, and yet increasingly the more contact you have with the people that are writing those important academic papers, you realize that they possess it in abundance. And the heartbreaking part of it is that, in a way, either they're taught or the structure, the system doesn't allow them to express that part of themselves. So they're telling a partial story. Doesn't diminish the importance of the partial story that they're carrying. But can you imagine what papers we would read if they were allowed to express their whole selves? I mean, it would be amazing. Rather than compartmentalizing it and say, oh, that group of people over there, and we're going to call them the spiritual ones, they can talk about that in their places. We will talk about head stuff in these places. And we silo ourselves and fragment ourselves all over the place. And it's sad to witness, because that's hard. That has an impact on our bodies.
Now, Tills, we seem to have a bit of an echo just in the last minute, so I'm going to ask you to say that again. Yeah?
Okay.
So we may have to edit. We may just edit just there. So you were saying about imagining these voices. Just say it again.
So I was saying, imagine
the papers,
these scientific, the people who write these amazing scientific papers, if they were given permission, allowed to express their whole selves, their whole story, their feelings and emotions, their passion, their love for what they do, alongside the reasoned academic research. Imagine the paper, the story we would hear then, and how it would maybe impact us. But also imagine what impact it's having on them that they can't do that, that it's not permissive to do that. And it's siloed to other quarters of society and therefore fragmented. So, the potential is amazing.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, there's so many places I could go with that. I'm just thinking about the people we've both known in the history of Schumacher, who have been instrumental, certainly for me, in making it possible for me to be on this journey. I'm thinking like Stephen Harding, for example, and Brian Godwin, who's there. But I'm wondering who have you met along the way who has been either pivotal for you or set you off on, learning or unlearning?
Well, there's many people in different ways. So I met, the only one time I kind of fangirled somebody at the college. I won't mind saying.
Oh, I know who this is. It's Drew Dellinger.
Yeah, exactly.
You told me this before.
Because
he is brilliant, though.
Yeah,
he is brilliant.
His poetry I met before, when I was probably in my early 30s, when I was really kind of struggling with that head-heart kind of disconnect, and it spoke to me. And I don't need to sort of extract from that why, but there was this one time that I found myself outside sitting around a fire, and I was on the other side, and through the flames, he was reading his poetry to this group. And it was just like one of those moments where life kind of comes full circle. And I couldn't have engineered that. I couldn't have kind of scripted that in my life. But the fact that it happened was, for me, a pinnacle moment. And he is both an intellectual, a political activist, and a teacher and a poet. So, in the fact that he can do all of these different things like a polymath, I have deep respect for. There's a woman who sadly also, like Chris Seeley, and Chris Seeley was a massive, massive influence. And I think about her often in terms of just her zeal for life, her playfulness, her creativity, but that the core of all of those things, which people might say are trivial, was a deep seriousness and a love and a passion for the world, And another woman who is similar is Polly Higgins, and just being in the orbit of these teachers and incredibly courageous and pioneering people sort of mirrors back a lot. It's not to mimic anybody, but it's to go, well, what's my version of that, and how can I find that in myself and help others also do the same? So, we're not parroting or mimicking, but we're going, well, there's that sense of freedom, that voice, that expression is in every person, and how can I become part of it and then free that up? I would say the other person, so there's Polly and there's Chris Seeley and Drew Dellinger, but the last person, if I've got the time to name, is Ian McGilchrist.
Yes, okay.
And he does lean
who I've worked with the others, but I've never worked with Ian McGilchrist. So tell me more about Ian.
So he does hark to the more intellectual end of the spectrum, I would say. I hope you'll forgive me for saying that. I do think he knows clearly within himself where his contribution is and who he's trying to make it to. So he is going back into the walled space of academia and saying, hey guys, there might be more than the rational, but here's a rational explanation for why. So what compassion he has in that, and he's using his intellect, and I feel that he also has, what's the word, humility, because when you get to that level in any life of influence and people listening to you, to also retain humility is profound, because you're then taken into lots of different quarters and said, oh, please influence us here, please influence us here. And he has the capacity, I feel, to know, no, this is the point I take us on our journey, and then it's for others to take it forward. Because in the Western world, when we find someone with a brilliant idea, like Elon Musk or something like that, then he becomes the answer to everything, and he's not. No human being is the answer to everything. We all have a piece to bring, but if we then bestow our attention and our expectation on a few, we very much limit the capacity and potential of the species to do what it needs to do. And that's what I admire in someone as intellectual but also profound in his bravery to offer something new, is that he doesn't, or my experience, I don't know where he would be now, is that it doesn't get drawn into quarters where he goes, no, that's my work is not that. That's for others to do. My work is here, and I love that, because it gives space then for others rather than just growing it, and that's influence.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because I see in the consulting world, for example, all kinds of people with some really good ideas who then try to grow them into the solution for everything.
Yeah.
Which may be not useful. Yeah. Mm. So we're on about half an hour, and I'm really interested in. So what's juicy for you right now?
Well, the freelancer, because I am freelance now. I'm not sort of in job, as it were. Is I find, for me anyway, it's a roller coaster. So there's moments of activity when there is a task in hand. And I had that for the beginning part of the year, particularly peaking around April, May into the end of June. And now I'm in that lull where it's what is in that space that if I were to attend to it, something might come. So the juicy edge at the moment is around three sort of notions. One is leadership, and particularly kin-centric leadership. So there's a group of people, a community that are inquiring into concentric leadership. I'm on the fringes of that, and I find that fascinating. Then the other one is sort of well-being, but well-being in the sense of a holistic sense of what well-being might be. So not in a I've got a problem, fix me, but how can I live in a whole sense in the world and feel that sense of balance and restoration. And then so the third one is around the natural nature connection, and that's of those three, that's the one where the language is the most awkward and clunkiest, because in reality nature is not out there. We swim in nature, we are nature, and at no point are we disconnected. We're inseparable from it. It's just that the story, the concept, the way we experience it often is told as a disconnect, as a separation. So it's what's hidden in plain sight, as it were. And it's where those three points or worlds sort of overlap. That's the juicy point. And at the moment, they're quite siloed. And I feel my work is around bridging silos. And so it's kind of, I'm moving in those spaces going, how can I circle and possibly begin to bring some of these people who do overlap into a conversation, and then in that conversation, what wants to at this point emerge that might serve people who are living lives that are suboptimal for their health, who want to live a more whole life and want to act from that space.
So I think people listening to this will be familiar to some of those silos, but the one that may be most new is kin-centric leadership. Did you say?
Yes.
And I think that may need a little bit of unpacking. What on earth is that?
I'll get a little bit wordy, and then hopefully we'll let the words dissolve a bit into a kind of feeling state. But
okay.
Kin-centrism is another way of saying animistic. And animistic is another way of saying everything that's alive has consciousness and is relatable to, we're in relationship with it. So I'm looking out over the fields of Dartington down to the River Dart. The Dart has consciousness. She is a living being. This beautiful Scots pine outside my window is a living being. Probably this Scots pine has been here way longer than me, has many, many stories to tell. The river, well, we're going back hundreds of thousands, millions of years, So kin-centrism is the circle, coming into that circle or hoop of life. Kin is, we're family. We're all family. And kin-centric leadership is then to say, well, how do we live our lives? Be it working lives, be it family lives, whatever form of our life expression, in relationship to all of that. That's concentric leadership.
Yeah. Now, how is that different from the third point? Maybe it isn't different. Maybe it's just closely related. We are not separate from. We want to get. It sounds like in close harmony with.
Yes, I can. Well, that's why they overlap. But nature connection could. Well, I think leadership is the operative word in the concentric leadership sort of context.
Right. Okay.
Nature connection and nature connection practices is well, yes. You do have a point there. To be fair, you do have a point. I think nature connection is more of a. That is a really good point. You're good at this,
yeah,
Chris.
yeah. But you know it. Oh, thank you. You know, but and and you know, you did describe them as not concentric but overlapping. I mean,
Yeah.
they're you know, and that thing about you know, this tree is a living being,
Hmm.
this river is a living being. You know, it's something I've been involved with now for a very long
Hmm.
time. I found some of that easier than others. I
Hmm.
remember you pulling me up once in a circle somewhere where we were talking about, I can't remember what it was, but I said, well, you know, someone said something about badgers, and I said, well, I'm not a badger. And you said, I think you find you are. You know, you know, um, uh, I find it much easier to feel kinship with a tree or a badger than a river, because the river is, it's really hard to say what a river is, you know, because it arrives from space as all the water that ever existed arrives,
Yeah.
you know, and takes all these different forms. And the water that arrives, is the river the river? Is it the water? Is it the ecosystem around the river? What is the river?
But that's a beautiful metaphor to say, well, what is a human being? Because for some reason,
Yeah,
because of our size, and if you're blessed with eyesight, you can kind of see a person, and then you can kind of separate them from another human being, or you can separate them from a tree. It's kind of easier in our mind to see that. Whereas, you know, a cloud or a river or a range of mountains, because of its vastness and its scale in proportion to us, it's much harder to do that. But then if you think about other cultures and traditions, they would
yeah,
pilgrimage to these places. And in the
yeah,
movement, you meet them and get to know them in their scale and in their all their different sides and edges and qualities. Um, so the way you would relate, the way you meet, the way you participate is different. But that's the learning. That's the process to do these things differently, to realize that there is so many more dimensions and so much
yeah.
vastness to the potentiality that we're just not even aware of most of the time.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, isn't it? You know, because if we go back to where I've worked, well, now I've just become a visiting professor again in a business school, and where you used to work, and how small the view is. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the epistemology of that work can be really tiny, and you're now talking about something that's really integrative, really holistic. I hate to use the word holistic because it's, but inclusive.
Mm.
How do we make this visible to that? You know,
Um,
that's a juicy question for me.
well, firstly, what I would say is it's not down to one person because that's a huge weight to carry. It
Yeah,
yeah.
I wasn't thinking of taking it on myself solo.
um, and
Yeah,
also,
yeah,
I I feel that um, it's not a mission of proselytization, um, and that's another yoke to kind of lift. Is this, well, I've got it, so I've got to go around and convert everybody else. I'm not saying you're doing that, by the way,
yeah,
because I don't think you do, and it's not. I don't think that's how you live your life. But that can often be a reaction. Is I want
yeah,
everybody, you know, to see what I see or feel what I feel or get what I get. And uh, energetically, I feel that can sometimes get the opposite reaction that I would be
for
seeking in
sure.
that case.
Yeah,
So
mm,
that's been my learning. Um, Rupert Sheldrake, when students at Schumacher College, and I'm sure he got asked this at other places that he would teach, is, you know, there's this moment
mm,
where your heart breaks at well, your heart breaks, and then the love is allowed to kind of be met, and in that sweet, sweet place, it's I want everyone to feel this. How do we do that? You know, how do So I don't want to dismiss that feeling because it's coming from a really tender, sweet place. And in that moment, activists are born. Activists with great passion are born. He would say, you need to throw a better party. Have a lot of fun doing what you're doing so that people are so curious and go, whatever that person's doing, I want to be doing, or I want to go over there and see what that is and be curious about it and meet it on their own terms in their own way. So I feel that it's more about opening up potential opportunities, doors, walking along, like you did for me. You walked alongside me in a year, which I knew I wanted to do, but there were times when I don't think I had the ability on my own to take the next step. And to have somebody just not do the walking for me or tell me what to do, but just say, oh, I'll just walk alongside for a bit. That is incredibly empowering. And it's those gifts, those ways of knowing that we're in the modern world, we're remembering. And we're remembering and interpreting it for what it's needed now. So it won't be an exact replica of what our ancestors would have done, but those initiatory experiences of meeting the unknown, which both is deeply desiring, alluring, and at the same time you feel like you might be going into the inferno or stepping off the void, and yet you're compelled to go. The modern world will say, well, no, let's write a risk management report about that, and we'll get health and safety on board, and we'll wrap you in cotton wool, and then it's gone. The moment's passed. So having people who have experience and the beginnings of some practices to walk people alongside that, walk people in. Businesses are just a reflection of other organisations and a reflection of the culture, the health of a culture. So, having people who will hold those initiatory processes, will encourage people and honour people that cross those thresholds and meet them on their return, which is really incredibly important, because I think in the modern world, we're beginning to understand threshold and initiation. We are clueless about return. And if we don't understand return, those gifts dissolve and disappear and are gone.
Tilley, we could talk for ages, but we're going to have to stop because we're on 40 minutes. I'll just say a couple of words to close this off, and I'll come back to thank you formally. But thank you, everybody who's been listening. This has been About Time with my guest today, Tilley. It's been a brilliant session with so many links to other podcasts. So I do encourage you to listen to some other parts of the series. Meanwhile, Tilley, just thank you so much for being with us. It's been an enormous pleasure to have this conversation here.